Hello BookTube, Sarah here and welcome to my channel. Today I'm coming to you with my weekly reviews for June the 22nd through the 28th. I am filming this on Friday night. It is later than normal. I just got home. For those of you who follow me on Instagram, you may have seen the picture that I posted Friday, today, or yesterday from when this video is getting posted, that I was in the hospital. I spent the most of today in the hospital. I got to the emergency room about just after like 11 o'clock in the morning this morning, and I finally got to leave at 6 o'clock. So I've been having heart palpitations just to kind of give you guys like what's going on. And more often than usual, they're not like the ones I used to have where it was what they call atrial flutter or AFib, where your heart's racing really, really fast. I've had that before, and I've had medication to combat that and things like that. This is more like some really weird beats, like beat, beat, pause, and then like a big beat. And I know this is very, very common. I think a lot of people, even people who don't have a heart condition, suffer from this. You know, it's a very common thing. It's called PVCs. I'm not exactly sure what it stands for. I'm going to Google search it later, but that's the short form of it. So essentially, the whole takeaway is that what's happening is not dangerous. If it gets worse, like, you know, it starts to speed up too much or things like that, then I'm to go back to the emergency room. But they kept me on a monitor from 11 till 6, essentially. So they can see that what's happening is not anything that's dangerous. It's more of an annoyance because I can feel it. And it's a little frustrating, and it's scary too. And I think that going in and having them tell me that, you know, you're okay, it's just, this is something we have to figure out why it's happening, what the catalyst is, and try and correct it. Because it shouldn't be happening, but it's not deadly, let's put it that way. But just going in and having them tell me that it's okay makes you feel so much better, because when this is happening, then the anxiety kicks in and it just makes it worse. Do you know what I mean? So anyway, the end result, the takeaway when I left was that I am to cut out caffeine. So I have to go down to decaf coffee. I am to cut out a lot of the tea that I drink. I can stick with herbal, but you know, if I'm going to cut out, like I made them a deal. If you're going to make me go to decaf coffee, which is not a big deal, the whole reason I drink coffee is because I like the taste of it with the creamer that I use. So for me, it's more the creamer than it is the coffee. So I made them a deal that if I go to decaf on the coffee, I'm still allowed to have my green tea every day. So I'm allowed to still have at least 1 or 2 cups of caffeinated tea a day, as opposed to the cup of caffeinated coffee and then the extra large tea that I would get every day. So, you know, compromise, people, compromise. I have to wear a Holter. They're going to book me an appointment to get a Holter monitor put on next week. Yuck. So I'm going to have to wear that for 48 hours because they want to see exactly what's going on, which is totally fine. They were going to keep me tonight. They talked about keeping me just so they could keep me on the monitor so they could see what it's like over 24 hours. And then she's like, well, 48 would be better. And I'm thinking, I am not staying here until Sunday of a long weekend, of the Canada Day long weekend. Like, that would really, like, be yucky. So they said, fine, no problem, we'll let you go. But if it gets worse over the weekend, come back in, blah, blah, blah. So I'm going to have to do that. And also, they've increased the medication that I take. They've increased the dosage of the medication that I take, because I've been on this medication for like 15 years. And over time, your body can kind of like get a resistance to it. Do you know what I mean? You know, so they're wondering if maybe that's what it is. So they're going to increase the dosage. And then I actually have an appointment to see the doctor that deals with these arrhythmias at the end of July. So as long as, you know, it doesn't get any worse, or hopefully it's going to get better, hopefully the medication and the cutting out of the caffeine and, you know, trying to drink a lot of water. They say if you're dehydrated or hungry, that can definitely also factor into getting these, you know, that'll kind of correct the problem. But I'm still going to, of course, talk to him when I go and see him at the end of July, that maybe there's a different med I can go on or something. I don't know. So we'll see. Anyway, just for those of you who saw my Instagram post and were wondering, I'm okay. Thank you very much. But I do not want this video to be horribly long because, like I said, I just got home and it is 7:45 and I need to eat. I haven't eaten. No, I shouldn't say that. I had breakfast this morning and then I ended up at the hospital, and I had a granola bar in my lunch bag because, of course, I grabbed everything when I left work because I did leave work to go to the hospital. I ate my granola bar and my chips on the way home. So I'm okay right now. I've had like my appetizer. But as soon as I'm done filming this, I'm going to have my dinner. And chat with my friends on a VKN, a virtual knit night, which I haven't done in a long time. So I'm very excited about that. So I read 7 books this week, you guys. So let me tell you all about them. So the first book was Jessi's Babysitter by Ann M. Martin. This is, of course, a middle grade fiction novel. Book number 36 in the Babysitters Club series. This was originally published in 1990. Average rating of 3.54 stars on Goodreads. I gave it 3.5 stars. This was an interesting one. Jessi's not my favorite character in the Babysitters Club. I've mentioned that before. Her stories, hers and Mallory's, have never been my very favorites. But this one was enjoyable. Jessi's 11 years old, and her mother decides to go back to work. And but of course, she's a junior officer in the Babysitters Club, meaning she can't sit at night at night or like too late on the weekends or something like that, because she is only 11, let's be honest, and unless it's for her own family. But her mother's going back to work, and she's got a younger brother and a younger sister, and her aunt, her dad's sister, comes in to be her babysitter, and her Aunt Cecilia tries to take over her life and telling her, no, you can't do this. You know, she's 10 minutes late coming home from a babysitting job, and her aunt pretty much tells her she can't go to a Babysitters Club meeting, you know, stuff like that. Telling her how to dress, how to wear her hair, and this and that. So yeah, it was an interesting story. It was kind of, you know, not anything I could relate to because I didn't ever have that happen to me, but I still really like it. I've started to notice it more as I'm reading through these books, how oftentimes in the B plot, it's usually something to do with one of the babysitting charges that they have, how that mirrored what was going on with Jessi herself, in which that Jessi was trying to take over this science fair project that Jackie Radowski was trying to do. And, you know, how she realized after the fact that, oh my gosh, I was doing this to him, and my aunt is doing this to me, kind of an idea. So it was a cute story. Actually, one of the higher rated ones that I've had in the last little while. And yeah, I mean, it was fun. The next one. Oh yes, I was going to preface this video by saying there are 2 books I'm going to talk about in this video that I absolutely hated. So I know I don't have to say this, but I'm going to say it anyway. If any of the 2 books that I mentioned that I state how much I dislike them, if you read these books and you love them, please don't think I'm actually saying anything about you. I mean, you obviously should know that, right? This is my opinion strictly, but I still want to say it because of how much I really disliked both of these books. And because both of these books have extremely high ratings on Goodreads. So obviously I am in the minority of this one. So the first of the 2, is A Virgin River Christmas by Robyn Carr. A contemporary romance novel. This is Virgin River book number 4, and narrated on audio by Therese Plummer. Published originally in 2008. Average rating on Goodreads of 4.13 stars. I gave this one 2 stars. This book was garbage. If I started the Virgin River series with this book, I would have never continued. If this was the first book I had ever read by Robyn Carr, I would have never picked up another book by her. That's how much I disliked it. But I know Robyn Carr can do far, far better than this, so I am giving her the benefit of the doubt that this was just a bad book. The whole premise of this story is about a woman by the name of Marnie, and her husband was killed in Afghanistan. Now, he wasn't killed in Afghanistan. In Afghanistan, he was gravely injured, and he ended up, you know, coming back to the U.S., where he had no life, really. He couldn't walk, he couldn't talk, he couldn't dress, he couldn't bathe, he couldn't do anything. He was essentially in a waking coma of sorts, where he could open his eyes and look around, but he couldn't answer you, he couldn't acknowledge you, you know what I'm saying? So, anyway, he lived like that for, I think, 2 or 3 years, which is heartbreaking, absolutely heartbreaking. Well, the man who saved his life, Ian, was his best friend, and the 2 of them were serving overseas together, and Ian actually pulled him out of the gunfire and all these things. So, Marnie had met Ian prior to their deployment, I think. And so it was for a very brief meeting regardless. And then when her husband came back home stateside and he was, you know, in this hospital or whatever, she used to write to Ian all the time to give him prognosis updates on her husband and this and that and the other thing. And Ian used to write back. And then one day he showed up and he was there for like 15 minutes and then he left because he couldn't handle it. He couldn't handle, and his reasoning is that he saved him, quote unquote, from living this not much of a life. Do you know what I mean? So he was kind of feeling this burden that, you know, why did I bother saving him? Why did I bother pulling him out of the line of gunfire if this is just how he was going to end up, kind of an idea. Well, then, of course, the husband ends up passing away. So about a year has passed, and Marnie has been trying to get in touch with Ian because she wants to tell him, A, that her husband died, and B, she has these baseball cards that they talked about or something like that. So anyway, this is where the story went completely off the rails for me. She met this man twice. She wrote him letters. He answered letters, so they were pen pals. She takes a leave of absence from work for like 6 weeks to go to Northern California to travel to these small little towns to search for a man she has met twice. A, bad idea. Right before the holidays when there's like snow and bad weather and things like that. So she's like has no money. Her family thinks she's ridiculously stupid for doing this. Like her sister keeps telling her, you have to come back. Don't be silly. You have a job. You know, you have to do your job and blah, blah, blah. And then she finally finds him and shows up at his house and he tells her to leave and she doesn't. She sits in her damn car in the cold, in the snow, until he lets her in. She's a bully. She bullied him and then she finally got into the house. Oh no, he came out because he thought she had left. And it turns out she had gone to go use the outhouse because the cabin he was living in, no plumbing, no electricity, like out in the middle of nowhere, Daniel Boone kind of an idea. And he found her half frozen in the snow. So he brought her in because he wasn't going to let her die. And then finds out she's got the flu. So then he keeps her, like lets her stay there while she gets better. And I'm like, you manipulated your way in. So, I mean, I kept getting so angry at her. I mean, just so angry at her. And then at one point, he was going into town because he lives way up on the mountain. And he was going to go into town to go to church and to the library. And she's begging him, please take me with you because I haven't been out to see anybody because I've been stuck here. You made that choice, you stupid you-know-what. Like, it made it sound like he was holding her against her will. Even when he went to town to get the doctor, to bring the doctor up to look at her, the nurse, the woman from the first book, Mel, is like, I want you to come back with me. You should come back with me and stay at the doctor's office. There's some beds upstairs. You can sleep there. And she's like, no, no, no. I'm going to stay here. I have unfinished business. You have no business with him. You have nothing to do with him. He was your husband's best friend. You exchanged 2 greetings in person and a couple letters that after your husband died, he stopped answering. He wants nothing to do with you. Leave him alone. These stories that force people out of their, like, it angered me. The point where this story, where I didn't DNF this book. I didn't DNF either of the books I'm going to talk about. But the point where I really stopped really paying attention was when he was out at his job. He sells firewood or something like that. Her sister shows up at the cabin to pretty much drag her out. Like, okay, Marnie might be sugar. I was going to say a bad word there. Marnie might be an idiot, but you have no right. She's an adult. You can't drag in and pull her out of there. So the sister shows up and starts throwing her weight around. And just before that, Marnie starts going through Ian's personal belongings looking for information. That's where I just kind of went, no, I'm done. And like I said, I kind of sort of listened to the rest of the story after that. I did finish it. Obviously did not love this one. Yes, I am going to continue on this one because I have enjoyed, to a point, most of the stories in this series. These are not my favorite by Robyn Carr. Her new stuff is so much better. But there's just something about this series that is not resonating with me. And I think it's very much an alpha male kind of a series. And the females, like Marnie has just, right from the go-get, I did not like her at all. So again, if you read this one and you loved it, I do apologize, but I just did not care for this story at all. The next book that I have to share with you guys is You'll Be Mine in 99 and The 100-Year Itch by Jennifer Drew and Holly Jacobs. This is obviously 2 contemporary romance novels. Harlequin's duet number 100, if you couldn't tell from that. This was originally published in 2003. Average rating of 3.63 stars on Goodreads. Excuse me, I had the hiccups, and I gave it 3.5 stars. I really enjoyed this one. This was part of my 40 Years of Harlequin project. Obviously, my 2003 issue, or book. And yeah, this one was a lot of fun to read. It was, this one was, they don't often do this in the duet series, but they did it in this book. And it's where each story is interconnected with the other story. So most of the time with the duets novels, you're getting 2 separate, completely different stories. Sometimes they're by different authors, sometimes they're by the same author. In this case, two different authors, but these two stories were interconnected. They both took place in the same small town called Hi-Ho, Ohio. And this town is celebrating its centennial, its 100-year birthday or date of incorporation or whatever it is with the town. So in the first story, it's about the town librarian, and she finds out that the town might not actually be turning 100. It might be turning at 99 because there was an issue with the paperwork way back when, and it wasn't filed until the next year, and yada, yada, yada. So anyway, there's this guy in town, and he is going to, he's tasked with picking, like, the beauty pageant queen, and this woman is also going to be the new spokesmodel for a car that they are building. So his boss sees Katie. Is it Katie is our main character? Katie. And says she's going to be it. She's going to be the winner. So he's trying to groom her to be in this beauty pageant. And it was cute. I mean, nowadays, a lot of people probably have a big problem with it because, you know, like, stereotypes and things like that. But for 2003, this was really fun. It really, really reminded me when he was, like, you know, making her over of my favorite scene. I love the movie Miss Congeniality, but when they are making her over, that is my favorite part in the entire movie. When she walks out of the hangar and trips. I'm sorry. I just think that just cracks me up every time. But that's kind of what that reminded me of. So that was the first story called You'll Be Mine in 99. And then the 100-Year Itch is about a reporter who comes up from Erie, Pennsylvania, because he has heard about this town centennial and wants to be there. And now he's also heard about the fact that this town might only actually be turning 99. Now, generally that wouldn't be that big a deal. But the reason it's a big deal is because there was an endowment from the original town founders that has been sitting in, like, some sort of a bank account just accumulating interest for the last century. And that money is slated to go to the local college when the town turns 100. So the college has pre-spent that money to build, like, a new wing and a new athletics, area and stuff like that. But if it comes out that the town is actually only 99, they're not going to be able to pay that loan back without that endowment, essentially. So this reporter's in town to try and snoop out the scoop, and he is running into problems with the local reporter, whose name is, what's her name? Zoe. And his name is Mace and Zoe. So they're the two in the second story. So they're kind of going, you know, head to head about this whole 100-year fiasco. So both these stories, super adorable. I really, really liked them. The duets line was such a great, fun line. I'd really, really love to see Harlequin do another romantic comedy imprint, because I really did love these. And I think a lot of people did. And I'm sad that they're no longer published them. But to do something similar would be a lot of fun. The next book that I finished, I tapped things over here on my tablet that I shouldn't have, was, okay. One of the first books, the first book this month, and it's already the end of the month, to get a 4.5-star rating from me. So this was Along for the Ride by Sarah Dessen. This is a YA contemporary romance. It was originally published in 2009. Average rating on Goodreads of 4.07 stars. I gave this one, like I said, 4.5 stars. This is my highest rated, hold on, bear with. I just want to double check. Yes, this is my highest rated book this month. So far. I still have 2 more books that I'm reading, but this was the highest rated so far this month. Sorry, I just gotta scroll back here on my tablet. So, this is the story of a girl by the name of Auden, A-U-D-E-N, and a boy by the name of Eli. Now, this is about the summer between high school and college. So she's, 18? And her parents divorced a couple years ago. And her father has invited her to spend the summer with him and his new wife and her new half-sister. The one thing that kind of got me in this one at the beginning, they called her stepsister. But no, it would be her half-sister. So regardless. But anyway, so she's been asked to come to spend the summer at this, like, beachside town that they live in. And, you know, kind of enjoy that summer between high school and college. So she's grown up in a very academic family. Both of her parents were professors. Her father's a writer. Her mother's a writer. And she didn't have that normal childhood that most kids did. She didn't go out ride bikes. She didn't go to sleepovers. She didn't, you know, do those kind of things that most kids would. Her brother's kind of the wild child. He's a few years older than her. So he spent his time since high school trekking around Europe and meeting various people and going on different adventures, whereas she's kind of been, you know, at home. So she goes to this little seaside town, and she doesn't much care for her stepmother, Heidi. She's a number of years younger than her father. But she thinks the world of her dad, and she thinks he's a pretty awesome guy. But until she's kind of seeing now through new eyes of him with this new infant baby that him and his new wife have had, she's kind of starting to see the things that her mother used to talk about, that he really does only think about himself, and he really doesn't, not that he doesn't care about the baby, but he's too busy. You know, it's several times in the book it's stated, he says, you know, to Heidi, I'm sorry, I can't help you with the baby at night. I have to have my 9 hours of sleep, or else I'm going to be no good. Or while he's working on his novel, leave me alone and don't bother me. This is my work. Don't you understand that this is my work? And poor Heidi is really suffering from postpartum depression. So in this story also, I keep forgetting her name. Auden meets up with this boy by the name of Eli. And he has a bit of a tragic backstory. Him and his best friend were in a car accident together, and his best friend was killed. And Eli was the one driving, so he kind of blames himself for this accident, even though it was truly an accident. I think it was somebody else was a drunk driver, and they hit their car. But yeah, I don't want to give too much more of the story other than that away. But that's what the story's about, is her learning about herself, learning about her family, making friends, and kind of having those adventures that she never had. Learning how to ride a bike, you know, staying out late, you know, having girlfriends, like female friendships and stuff like that, you know, that she never really experienced when she was in high school. And it's amazing. It was a great coming-of-age story. I absolutely loved it. I know a lot of people really, really love Sarah Dessen. This is the second book by her I've read, but actually it's funny because I've read this one. I read this one about probably close to 10 years ago. And then I read Saint Anything, I think last year, the year before. And then now I've read this one again, but I should really pick up some more of her books. So for any of you who have read Sarah Dessen, if you have a favorite of hers, please do let me know what it is in the comments below, because I am looking to add some more of her books to my repertoire, if you will. So yeah, so that one was really, really cute. The next book that I finished, be prepared for a rant, you guys. This is the book that I despised. When I do, and I do plan on doing like a year-end review, best and worst. No, I'm not going to do a worst of, but a best list. I am probably also going to include like 2 or 3 of my worst books of the year. If this one doesn't make my worst book of the year, I'm afraid to see what book actually will, because this book was damaging and horrible, and it is so beloved by so many people. I have to wonder if I read the same book as everybody else. Because, and I'm not saying that, like, please don't think that if you love this book, that I'm thinking that you're an idiot, because I don't. But the way that I read this, as opposed to, obviously, the way other people read this, were vastly, vastly different. And that book is Paper Princess by Erin Watt. It's labeled as a YA/new adult contemporary romance. That's one problem that I had with it. Book number 1 in the Royal series. This was narrated on audio by Angela Gothes. Published originally in 2016. Average rating of 4.03 stars on Goodreads. I gave it 1.5 stars. The only reason I gave it 1.5 stars is because I did not DNF it. If I had DNF'd this book, it would have gotten, if I DNF a book, it gets a 1-star rating from me on Goodreads. I gave this one a 1.5 because I came so close so many times. If I had been reading this in a physical book, I would have DNF'd it, I guarantee it. But I think on audio, it came in somewhere around 9 hours. And the fact that I listen to stuff at 2 times speed, I flew through this relatively quickly. This book was horrible. Absolutely horrible. And I'm so disappointed, extra disappointed in it, because A, I've read Erin Watt before. I read When It's Real, and I really, really liked that book. It was super, super adorable. It was so cute. It was like a rock star YA romance. And also, Erin Watt is the pseudonym name for 2 other authors. The one of them I don't know the name of, but the other one is Elle Kennedy. And I have read Elle Kennedy. Elle Kennedy wrote a number of books for Harlequin. And I know her writing's good. And that's part of where this disappointment came in. So for those of you who don't know what this story is about, as I said, it is labeled actually on Goodreads as a new adult. It also says YA, but it's labeled higher as a new adult. This is not a, well, this is a new adult novel, but the main characters in this book are 17 years old. They are in high school. Please do keep that in mind as I give my synopsis, tell you what this book is about. This book is about a girl by the name of Ella. Is it Ella? I don't even know. I don't care. Ella. And she has had, to give credit, a very difficult upbringing. She has no idea who her father is. Her mother got knocked up one night, and her mother's done her best to raise her, and then her mother ends up dying of cancer. And since the age of 15, Ella has been keeping food on the table and a roof over her head by, wait for it, stripping. Yes, stripping, kids, in a YA novel. Regardless of what it's labeled on, this contains characters that are in high school. This is a YA novel. End of discussion. So, she ends up, at the very beginning of the book, she meets a man by the name of Callum, who was her father's best friend. And behind the scenes, DNA testing had been done, or some paternity testing had been done, or some such nonsense. And he took her and said, "You're now going to be raised by me. I am now your legal guardian." So anyway, he moves her into, she goes from essentially poverty to this opulent mansion on the East Coast, I think somewhere in the Carolinas. And he has 5 sons. This is where the royals part of it comes in. The 5 sons, the family's last name is Royal. So she is now their new sister. And they keep referring to her as their younger sister. So throughout, from the second that she meets these boys, they essentially abuse her. Mentally, physically, and wait for it, sexually. Yes, sexually. The one brother comes into the kitchen, and as she's making breakfast, and pretty much grabs his stuff and starts, like, you know, coming on to her. They have an entire discussion at one point about passing her around through all 5 of them because they think she's sleeping with the father. This is not a YA novel. I'm sorry. These are teenagers. Now, they also go to a party, and the part, again, like I said in the other one, the part that kind of made me go, okay, I'm done, the part in this book that made me go, okay, I'm done, was extremely disturbing. That they go to a party, and some other guy slips her something into her drink. Or however, no, he hit her with a dart in the shoulder. And he pretty much shot her up with some sort of an illegal substance. And, you know, he jokingly said, "Sorry, I didn't mean to touch you with my dart, you know, ha ha ha." And she's like, "Okay, that kind of hurt, but don't let it happen again." Well, then she quickly starts to realize that she doesn't feel so good. So he tries to take advantage of her. Well, one of the brothers, Reed, which is her love interest in this story, rescues her. And they drive her home. So she's on ecstasy, which is making her paw at everything she possibly can. She is trying as hard as she can to get all up in him, right? And, you know, I'm thinking, no, we're not going to go there, because regardless of how you look at it, she's drunk, or she's intoxicated. She cannot think for herself. They get back to the house. He agrees to, like, lay down with her to make sure she's okay. And he has sex with her. I can't say that. For those of you who have read the book, if I'm wrong, because at that point I tuned it out. So I don't know whether they actually did it or not. Regardless of the fact, he still took advantage of the fact that she was intoxicated and could no way consent to what was about to happen. She could not consent. I'm sorry. Regardless if she liked you or not. That is one of... that doesn't come into play. As someone who is a sexual assault survivor, that happened to me at the age of 17 by a friend, by a guy I actually liked and had a crush on. He still did it to me. I still did not consent. It's still considered rape. I wasn't drugged, but I'm just saying, the excuse that she liked him does not hold a candle or does not hold water to me. I'm sorry. That actually literally infuriated me. And that was the point that I pretty much said I'm done. So at that point, I didn't finish the book. I was listening to it at work, and I pretty much took my headphones off and put them down and let the book play out. So yeah, in a way, I DNF'd this book. And I DNF'd this series. I will not be continuing on, because I've heard it gets even worse as it goes on. So, again, I apologize if you like this. I'm not apologizing. If you like this book, I'm glad that you enjoyed this book. If the characters had been a few years older, 19, 20, maybe they were in college, a lot of the things that happened in this book I could have let slide. You know, the drinking, the drugs, you know, the fighting, but the abuse, the molestation, and the attempted or rape or attempted rape, I don't know which happened, none of that I can condone. I'm sorry. This book, this is a disgusting book in my opinion, and this one I read for the Romanceopoly. It was recommended by, I think, the girls at the Undercover, the Under the Cover book blog, or just from Peace Love Books. I can't remember which one. But yeah, this book seriously disturbed me, and if you have not read this series, you know, maybe check it out for yourself. I don't know. But just be forewarned what you're going into. Let's just put it that way. Deep calming breath. Let's get into the books. The last 2 books that I read this week that I really, really enjoyed, both of them. So we're going to end on a high note, you guys. The first book is Wedding of the Season by Laura Lee Guhrke. This is a historical romance novel. It is book number 1 in the Abandoned at the Altar series. This was narrated on audio by Anne Flosnick, published originally in 2010. Average rating of 3.52 stars on Goodreads. I gave this one 4 stars. This story was adorable. I have not read a good contemporary or historical romance in a while. So it was really, really fun to read this one. I think this might be one of the only ones I read this month in historical romances. What's fun about this one, I read this one for the Audible Romance Package Challenge, and this was for Edwardian. Now, I had originally picked a different book, but that one was like 15 hours, and I was not going to get to it this month. I was not going to have time to listen to a 15-hour long audiobook this month. So I did a search on Goodreads for Edwardian historical romance, and this book came up, and I looked, and it was part of the Audible Romance Package. So I mentioned this before, that if you know of something that will fit into a time period, even though it's not on one of the lists that Audible gives you, please feel free to substitute it in. That's not a problem. So this one does take place in 1901, so it is part of the Edwardian era. And it was so much fun to be reading this story about these characters that are, like, in a way, they're the children and grandchildren of probably the characters that you were reading about in the Regency romances. You know what I mean? Like, if you think about it that way. So this story was a little bit progressive in a way. Our main character, Beatrix, drives an automobile. She drives a Daimler car. Daimler or Daimler, I'm not sure how it's pronounced. And they listen to ragtime music, and, you know, they smoke, the one character smokes cigarettes and stuff like, I'm not saying that's a character trait. I'm just stating that, you know, the women are a little bit more, not as constricted as they were, but Beatrix is still kind of grown up with that whole, in that bubble, that very restricted bubble. This is how a lady acts, this is what happens. And she was engaged to Will, who was a duke. And then he has always been into archaeology, especially Egyptian. And he got a letter about 2 weeks before they were to get married saying, I want you to come to Egypt with me. So he asks Beatrix, would you come? And she said no. A lady wouldn't go to Egypt. You know, a lady's going to stay at home. She's going to summer in the country. She's going to raise her children a certain way. You know, this, that, and the other thing. She's not going to go off and have these, like, wild adventures. So Will realizes this is a once-in-a-lifetime deal, and he leaves. And he's gone for 6 years. So obviously their engagement is broken. So then he receives word that she's now engaged again to a different duke. And, lucky girl. And so he ends up coming back to England. So the story kind of takes off from there, and it's the second chance romance between these two. Bee and her, or Trix, as she's known by in the book, her and the new suitor are not, they're not evenly matched. I mean, they like each other well enough, but they don't feel that thing for each other, essentially. And then she ends up, I don't want to give away too much of the story, but what I really enjoyed about the story was a lot of the discussion about ancient Egypt, and the fact that Will is part of the team looking for Tutankhamun's, or King Tut's tomb. And I did some research after I finished the book because I couldn't remember exactly when his tomb was unearthed. And it wasn't unearthed till 1922. So the author did take some liberties in this book by stating that they had found the staircase to the tomb. So she predated it by about 20 years. But Howard Carter, who is the man who actually found the tomb, does make an appearance in this book in the form of a telegraph, which is kind of fun. I really do like it when historical romances, even, because they're considered to be a bit more flighty, you know, they're bodice rippers, that kind of thing. But when they actually bring real historical figures in, I kind of think that's really fun. And the fact that they did that with this, I thought was enjoyable. I am kind of disappointed that I do wish that the author had put like an author's note in there stating that, because you do often see that in historical romances or historical fiction novels, that, you know, note to the reader, please note that I have changed these certain facts to fit better with the story, if that makes sense. She didn't do that, so that was a little bit of a disappointment. But still, overall, this was a really, really fun historical romance. If you're looking for something set outside the Regency period, definitely check this series out. There's 3 books in total, and I'm very much looking forward to getting to the other 2. And then the last book that I finished this week, sorry, trying to drink my water, was Sweet Summer Sunset by Delores Fossen. This is a contemporary romance novel. Book number 3 in the Coldwater, Texas series. I have read the first book, I have not read the second book, and I've read this book. Published originally in 2019. This one just came out in June. Average rating of 4.05 stars on Goodreads. I gave this one 4 stars. I really, really liked it. So this was the story of Eden and Nico. And Nico is the brother of one of the characters from the first book. And that's usually how these small town romances work, that somebody's brother or cousin or mechanic or however it works. And him and Eden have been best friends since they were kids. They kind of hung out in this group together. And along with Nico's brothers and the man that Eden eventually married named Damien. So anyway, at the beginning of the book, Damien and Eden have been divorced now for about 6 months. And, you know, he's still almost harassing her, like, are you sure you're okay? Or, you know, I know you probably miss me oh so much, but you've got, you know. And then Damien announces that he's getting married to this other woman named Mimi. And, you know, so, you know, Eden finds this out at the very beginning of the book. So she's kind of upset because they literally just divorced 6 months ago. So the town is now starting to talk because that's what small towns do. And, you know, Nico decides to try and take some of that away by kissing her in public. So now the whole town is kind of talking about Nico and Eden because Nico is like the town playboy. He will sleep with pretty much, like, the reputation he has is that he will sleep with anybody. Well, that's not really what he is. He is a lot more careful than that, but that's the you know, the reputation he has. And very much a double standard, because if he was a she, it would be completely different, right? Like the town, you know what. So anyway, he does kind of have a very bad reputation, though, because he's got an adopted sister. His adopted mother had a daughter, like an adopted daughter, named Piper, who is, I think, 16 years old. And the other plot of this story revolves around Piper. And because their mother, or their adopted mother, just passed away. So she's now going to be raised by her adopted mother's sister, so her aunt, essentially. And she's kind of having a very rough go of it, that her mother just passed away, and, you know, she's kind of dealing with that. She's got this boyfriend that she's sleeping with, and she has a pregnancy scare, and she wants to spend the summer at this cabin in Coldwater. The 2 of them live in San Antonio, but Piper wants to spend the summer in Coldwater so she can be close to her brother and enjoy the summer with her brother as well as her aunt. Her aunt is very straight-laced, you don't talk about sex in front of her. Divorce is a horrible thing. Marriages breaking up is horrible. Very, very, very old-fashioned in her thinking, even though she's not really that old. But Raelle is the aunt's name. She does not want Piper to spend this much time with Nico because she thinks he's a bad influence. That he constantly has these women coming out of his apartment, and he cannot stick with one person, and he's very promiscuous and things like that. So those are the 2 stories that are kind of intermixed within this book. And I really liked it. I have to admit, I really did enjoy the story of Nico and Eden. But even more so, Piper's story is what I really enjoyed. And I thought it was so good. There is like a big reveal towards the end of the book that I'm pretty sure I called at about 25% of the way through the book. So it's not like it was like some sort of a mystery where they were trying to keep it hush-hush. It's pretty easy to guess if you've read enough contemporary romance novels to know where this is going. But it was still really, really enjoyable. So anyway, guys, that is all that I read this week. Very, very pleased with most of it. Yes, 2 of the books were pretty bad, but you know what? That's going to happen. Not every book that you read you're going to absolutely love. And again, if you like those books, you know, let's not hash it out in the comments, shall we? There's no need to get into it down there. If you want to give your opinion, that's fine, but I am not going to... I'm not looking to start arguments with anybody. Let's put it that way. I want this to be a very positive environment, you know, and if you haven't read them and, you know, maybe you're still like, well, I still would like to check it out, then please, by all means, do so. It is a free world. Well, most of the places it is. And you can read and, you know, whatever you want. So go ahead. But anyway, guys, like I said, that's all I have for this video. Until my next one, take care and happy reading, everybody. Bye.